Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. This week we were breaking down UFC Fight Night Blaydes vs Volkov. But before we get into that, I'd just like to quickly recap last week. It was the best event in terms of my verdict predictions since doing these YouTube reviews. We had got ourselves a strap, finishing in the top 10% with a 9,449 XP gain. We went 6 of 6, including both underdogs, Espinosa and Calvillo. Two of the fights on the main card were updated though, so they weren't actually my breakdown, but if you follow me on Verdict, you'll be able to see anything that I do in regards to card changes. And then we also hit the multi last week, so $40.09. It was Espinosa, Philly, Vittori via sub and Calvillo to win by round 4-5 or decision. So we're sitting in the green now. We're more than 37 units in profit, so essentially the next 37 UFC events we're on betting for free. Just to quickly recap the two fights that were moved to the main card. Agapova, she looks seriously dangerous. Cypher's already outsized at strawweight, and then she went up to flyweight for that one. Agapova, natural at the weight class, looks very dangerous, and I expect her to move through the rankings pretty quickly. The Rosa and Aguilar fight was pretty close. I thought Rosa could have grappled more and implemented his BJJ, but his cardio held up, the karate type style bouncing around. He looked very good. And yeah, like I said, he maintained the output through the full 15 minutes. The Espinosa fight went as I expected. He had a massive speed advantage, looked really good on his feet. Used his length well. The switch stance to southpaw, setting up the left body kick was really nice. And then yeah, when they did grapple and go to ground, it was on his terms like I predicted. I thought Rosa was going to struggle too much closing the distance. The Philly fight, super exciting. Jourdain did prove himself to be quite a good fighter. He dropped Andre in the first round. I feel like he implemented leg kicks a little too late, and Philly just managed to incorporate enough wrestling. I would have liked to have seen more, but did enough to take the decision. Vittori went exactly how I thought, first round sub. I was a bit annoyed with him going for the guillotine 3 times because you lose position, and he was getting Roberson was bucking out of it, but as soon as he went for the rear naked, he sunk it. First round with that, which I was pretty excited about at the time. And then the Calvillo fight, also super impressive. First round I was a little worried. She looked a little disheartened and then came out like a different fighter. Huge grappling advantage. I don't know what Eyes Corner were telling her to not use her kicks. I know they're worried about Calvillo countering and taking her down, but once she took that weapon away from her, Cynthia looked better on the feet anyway. And then I had no answer for the ground game. Pretty incompetent down there, couldn't get back up. And yeah, Cynthia whitewashed the score sheet, so pretty impressive there. Alright, so I'd like to move to the bottom of this card now. First fight is Jim Miller versus Roosevelt Roberts. Roosevelt with the quick turnaround here, 2 weeks since his last fight. We got Jim Miller at 2.89 times and Roosevelt at 1.53 times. Miller's 31-14 with 1 no contest, 20-13 and 1 no contest in the UFC, and 3-2 in his last 5. Roberts is 10-1, 4-1 in the UFC, and 4-1 in his last 5. So quickly to Miller, he's one of the longest standing UFC vets. He'll be at a height disadvantage here, but the reach is only 2 inches. And he's also going to have the strength and power advantage both in the clinch and with strikes. He's only got 4 career knockouts, but he does sit down on his punches, and I think they come with quite a bit of power. He's also obviously a dangerous BJJ black belt, 17 career wins by submission, and he's also really good defensively on the ground. He's only been subbed by really high level guys, I think Charles Oliveira, Michael Chiesa and Nate Diaz. And out of all the guys that he's been grappling with and on the ground, I think that's pretty impressive to note, which is going to play a factor in this fight because Roberts does fancy himself a submission artist as well. I feel like Roberts' advantage will be in the stand-up though. Although I did say Miller has the power advantage, Roberts has the crisper striking. He throws the straighter punches, which is obviously going to land first before Miller's kind of winging haymakers or hooks. One thing in the last fight that we got to see was I didn't really like Roberts letting Brock Weaver back him up. He didn't look too good going back, but backing up, but I feel like he was just confident wherever the fight went. Weaver was a big step down in competition for where Roberts had been fighting, but now all of a sudden this is a huge step back up. So it's going to be interesting to see how he goes. And to think, looking at the betting odds quickly, that Roosevelt Roberts rather, is actually an even bigger favourite against Jim Miller than he was against Brock Weaver. I think that's a little bit ridiculous. It's a little bit worrying in terms of the betting odds. The thing is, Miller is really old in the tooth and he wears damage super poorly, and he always slows down after the first round now, and when he gets to the third round he looks like he's just staying in there. And to be honest, I think Roosevelt's boxing is too nice. He should be landing first, and I feel like the experience fighting in the small octagon 2 weeks ago against Brock Weaver, a guy who wanted to back him down, he's going to put him in good stead here for Jim Miller, who's probably going to try and do the same things. I do think Roberts will experience some adversity at points in the fight, whether he gets cracked with an overhand from Miller blitzing in or experiences some dicey grappling exchanges, but I think he outpoints a decision. It's currently paying 3.4 times at the moment on verdict, so I'll be rolling with that. I could potentially see Roberts locking up one of them patented guillotine chokes with Miller diving in on his legs up against the cage, but like I said, I think Jim Miller's probably too defensively sound. He's only been subbed by really high level guys, and the 11.4 times odds for the submission is not really high enough for me to take that risk. Moving on, Bilal Muhammed versus Lyman Good. Bilal's 1.43 times and Lyman Good's the 3.3 times underdog. Bilal is 16-3, 7-3 in the UFC and 4-1 in his last 5 fights. Good is 21-5 with 1 no contest. 3-2 in the UFC and 3-2 in his last 5. So, from my opinion, both guys have been pretty solid in the UFC. They've only dropped fights to higher tier opposition, and have kind of held their own. I know Lyman Good got choked out by Damian Maia in 2 fights ago, but that's nothing to knock on regarding Damian Maia being one of the best BJJ artists that we've ever seen in the UFC. I'd like to start with Bilal. He typically starts pretty slow in his fights and then ramps up. His conditioning's obviously there because in the second and third rounds his output is really high. But what I'd like to note, in his last fight against Sato, he got working from the bell. He had a really busy first round, and I like to see that. It shows a bit of evolution and shows that he knows that he's got his conditioning there to last the 15, so why not get it going right from the start. He looked really good in that fight. He was throwing a variety of strikes and worked the body well. And his defense numbers were also really high. He was catching lots of Sato shots on the gloves, and Sato's a pretty good striker in his own right. Bilal was really strong in the clinch, especially once he closes his grip to get you down. Some of his shots, though, are a bit naked and out in the open, so I feel like this smaller octagon, if he can get Lyman Good back up against the cage, where he doesn't have to shoot out in the open, that's going to be better for his game. He's not really a finisher, though. He's really good at moving to dominant positions once he's on the ground and controlling the fight. And, once he's in a dominant position, inactivity won't let the referee stand you up. For example, he had Sato's back for a large portion of the first round, but the referee is not going to stand you up from that position because it's such a dangerous spot to be in. Going to Lyman, he's one of the biggest guys in the division. I honestly don't know how he makes the weight. He's such a physical beast. He's going to have a pretty large power advantage against Bilal here in the striking. I know Bilal's kind of sneaky strong in the clinch, but I can't help but think Lyman will be stronger there as well, at least early. He's got 11 wins via knockout, including all 3 of his UFC wins. He's super dangerous early, and although he does slow down later and he's less powerful, he does actually keep his output relatively high. To his ground game, he does have subs, but I watched a few of them. They don't look very good at all. I don't think the opposition was too good. He was attacking the sub without having positions, going for rear nakeds without hooks in, stuff like that. I'm pretty sure Bilal will be pretty wise to anything down there. And, to state the obvious, Lyman's going to want to keep this standing. He's got solid takedown defense, 75%, and I'm a little worried by Bilal's naked shots. But, like I said, I think the small octagon will help him. There's pretty much 2 tales of this story. I feel like Good is going to land an early knockout, or Bilal's going to win the distance. I feel like Bilal's got a very good chin. He was KO'd by Vicente Luque in the first round, and although Lyman Good and Luque are similar in stature and power, Vicente Luque is a much more technical striker and much nicer with his strikes and much more versatile. And Bilal also went 3 rounds with Jeff Neal. He lost that fight, but he didn't go out. And he lost the fight due to Jeff Neal keeping up his output and keeping his power throughout 3 minutes. 3 rounds, 15 minutes. And Neal's impressive takedown defense, 92% for his career, and I think Bilal went 0-7 in that fight. I don't think Lyman Good can replicate that kind of performance, and I think he's going to grind out a decision win here. Unfortunately, it's only 1.88 times. I'm still going to roll with it. There's definite value in the Lyman good KO at 6.8 times, but I just won't be taking that risk considering the durability of Bilal. I've heard a few people talking here about Muhammed just finishing Ramadan in May. I don't think that's going to play a factor. He's been doing Ramadan for his whole life, competing around these times, very professional. I don't think it's going to come into this one at all. Something that I'd like to talk about though is that Lyman Good literally had coronavirus only 2 months ago. I don't know how badly he suffered. He's been in interviews after that saying, he felt just a little off, came back quite quickly, but I feel like that's got to put a dent in his strength and conditioning. And Bilal's already going to want to grapple and take him into the deep water, into the second and third rounds, and I feel like that does not play into Lyman Good's chances very well at all. So yeah, Bilal by decision. Raquel Pennington versus Marion Reneau. Raquel is 1.22 times and Marion is 5.52 times. Pennington's 10-9, 7-5 in the UFC and 2-3 in her last 5. Reneau is 9-5-1, 5-4-1 in the UFC and 2-2-1 in her last 5. So you're looking at the records, they're both not great. Pennington's is slightly worse. If you look into it though, all her losses are really tough fights. In the UFC, her 5 losses have been to Holm twice, Andrade, who she also beat in a fight before that, and then the rematch Andrade won, I'm pretty sure. Jermaine Durandamy and then Amanda Nunes. Both girls, pretty good striking defense on the numbers. I feel like Pennington's is genuinely better in this area, even though the stats don't agree with me. Because even in that last fight against Irene Aldana, she was getting bossed around the cage by a genuine striker, and she had 72% striking defense in that fight. Pennington is also the one that usually likes to walk her opponents down, so it was strange to see Aldana own the centre in that fight. I think Raquel was just having a few troubles reading her and reading her length. But there's not going to be the same problem in this fight in terms of Pennington having her back against the cage. Marion lets the fighters take up all the space in front of her, and Pennington will walk her down as she usually likes to do. Reneau is typically a counter striker on the feet, but it's not even in terms of countering an opponent. She'll almost let her opponent back her up past the back line and then blitz forward with a combo and do it all again. For that reason, she just inhibits herself of winning a decision. She's 1-5 when it's gone to the scorecards before, which is not favourable at all, considering women's MMA does typically go to the decision a lot of the times when it's only the 15 minutes. Reneau is the much more dangerous grappler though, which is going to be where her biggest advantage is in this fight. She's got 3 submission wins and she's a first degree black belt under Kleber Luciano. The thing about her grappling is she's struggled to kind of implement it in MMA just through lack of takedowns. She's on the stats here, you can see she's got 100% accuracy, but she's only attempted 3 in 10 UFC fights. Typically she limits herself to pulling guard or letting opponents take her down and then working her ground game from there, which isn't really a sustainable method to implement your BJJ. But I feel like that's where this fight gets the most interesting. Pennington shouldn't go for takedowns due to Renault's danger there, but that will take an element of Raquel's game away because she always mixes in the takedown threat with her striking to keep opponents guessing and just have a more versatile arsenal. To my pick, Pennington should win this fight. She trains at altitude, she's got an endless gas tank and has the skills to out-volume Reneau on the feet. An outpointed decision. Pennington rarely wins finishes fights. She usually goes to decision. However, on verdict, it's only 1.43 times, which is just too short to entertain at all. So I'm going to chase some XP, and I'm going to ride the chances of Raquel's IQ lapsing, or her just not really recognising Renault's danger on the ground, initiating some grappling exchanges, letting Reneau pull guard or fall into her guard, and get wrapped up in a submission. From the guard or from top position. I'm liking chances of Reneau to pull her into a triangle or an armbar there, and it's probably the only way I see Marion winning is via submission. So I'm going to set up some XP on it. It's currently paying 49.67 times. I expect that to shorten a bit between now and fight night. But I'm going to roll with that. I'm going to select the second round as well. No other reason than Pennington's lone career loss via submission was in the second, and Renault's most recent submission victory against Sarah McMahon was in the second round, and that was only in 2018, so a bit of recency there. And that's that. Go on to the co-main. We've got Josh Emmett at 1.6 times versus Shane Burgos at 2.66 times. Emmett's 15-2, 6-2 in the UFC and 4-1 in his last 5. Burgos is 13-1, 6-1 in the UFC and 4-1 in his last 5. This should be an absolute barn burner. I love this fight. Both guys throw leather. They love to come forward, walk their opponent down, and they've got super high output. With regards to output, I think Burgos is probably even higher. He's thrown over 200 strikes in his last 2 fights and has landed 75 significant strikes in 6 of 7 of his UFC fights. And the only one that he didn't was when he won by first round submission. So that just goes to speak of his cardio and his ability to throw it absolutely everything at it for 15 minutes. Emmett will have the power advantage. He's got legit one-shot knockout power. He also has a wrestling advantage. He's super strong once he locks his hands, and he's explosive closing the distance. We've seen that so many times. Closing the distance, whether that be for strikes or for wrestling. He's super quick to get across the mat. One thing to note with his striking is he doesn't mix it up too well. I feel like he headhunts a little too much. I feel like he'd have more success with his hands if he went to the body more often and got his opponent thinking about other angles. And a problem for him is going to be closing that 5-inch reach discrepancy. The only fighter he's faced at 145 with dimensions like that's Michael Johnson. He did win by knockout in that fight, but he was losing the whole fight up until that point in the 3rd round. He was struggling to land strikes. I think he landed 22 strikes for the fight. He didn't land a takedown. He went 0 of 3. And Burgos is 2 inches even longer than Michael Johnson. So I feel like that could be a problem here for Emmett. Burgos is the better technical striker in my opinion. His jab is super fast, it's on the money. He's slick with his angles and he works the body so well. I feel like that's going to be a massive weapon in this fight because Jeremy Stephens hurt Josh Emmett to the body before finishing him, and that was his only loss via finish. Burgos also has better versatility. I like his kicks. He's also so confident on the feet. I like his defense. His head movement is on point. He slips punches really well and counters straight off the back of them. I don't like when he walks forward without his hands up. He does do it very frequently because he's so confident. I hope he recognises in this fight that Josh Emmett could put him out and he doesn't get crazy like that, but he could because it's part of his entertaining nature. Burgos' only loss is to Calvin Kattar, who's an extremely polished striker, and he also did have success in that fight. He split Kattar's nose, and Kattar did end up finishing him in the 3rd, but that was kind of over volume, and I feel like it's going to take that kind of technical striker to knock out Burgos, not the wild man that Josh Emmett is. I do think Josh Emmett can put his lights out, but I'm going to go with Burgos. Given the fact that these guys are going to trade blows at various stages throughout the fight, I'm going to pick Burgos to land cleaner and vary it up, go to the body, and I'm going to go by him by TKO at 6.15 times. I'm going to play it in the 3rd. 2 of Burgos' TKO wins were in the last round, and although these guys might go down early and either one of them could go down due to swinging absolute heat, I think they're both durable enough to survive a bit of a war, and then Shane's body work to pay off as the fight wears on. Kind of X factor in this one is whether Josh Emmett can implement his wrestling, but like I said, I feel like Burgos' takedown defense is going to hold up. I feel like the reach advantage is going to put him in good stead to keep distance and ensure that Emmett has to cover much more to secure the takedowns, and he might struggle with it like he did in that MJ fight. Okay, going to the main event, we've got Curtis Blaydes versus Alexander Volkov. Blaydes is 1.28 times and Volkov's 4.62 times. Blaydes 13-2 with 1 no contest, 8-2 and 1 no contest in the UFC, and 4-1 in his last 5. Volkov is 31-7, 5-1 in the UFC, and 4-1 in his last 5. Start off with Blaydes, an absolute beast. He's arguably the best wrestler in the heavyweight division, only perhaps bested by DC. He's so tenacious, one of the heaviest ground games in the sport, and he's getting much better at keeping guys down now. I think if you cast your mind back a few years, that Mark Hunt fight, he landed 10 takedowns in that fight, but Mark Hunt kept getting up, you know. He obviously had to get up 10 times. You don't see that so much now with Blaydes fights. He gets guys down and he keeps them down. He is criticised of being a little bit boring, which is true to an extent, as he does just like to pass guard and use grappling for control time. But then he absolutely explodes and at some point and rains down ground and pound and elbows like nothing I've ever seen before. It's the nastiest I've seen. His last fight also proved that he can do it standing up, because JDS stuffed all 6 of his takedowns and he still finished him on the ground. Still finished him standing up. JDS couldn't take the power on the feet. And in reality, Curtis's only 2 losses in his career to Francis, and both times Francis was on absolute tears. It wasn't that Derek Lewis post-Stipe version of Ngannou. It was when Francis was first on the come-up, and then the start of Francis has come up to where he is now, and he's an absolute monster. It's the worst stylistic matchup for Blaydes. It's a terrible stylistic matchup for anyone, considering the power that he's got. But he's probably one of the only guys that can keep Blaydes off of his hips due to his power. To Volkov, bit of an experience advantage here. He's got 38 pro fights, decorated M1 career, time in Bellator. But his experience advantage seemingly nullified in my head just due to the relative inactivity of Volkov since breaking into the UFC. And if you look at the numbers, Blaydes actually has far more octagon fights than Volkov anyway. Volkov's definitely the more pure and technical striker. He uses the jab, uses the kicks at good effect to utilise his length. He's got the same reach as Blaydes in this fight, but his height advantage is still going to give him that kind of advantage at distance. On top of their obvious differences in skill sets, in which Volkov uses his kicks more, which typically gives you better distance management anyway. He's a high volume striker. If you let Volkov fight at a distance, he's going to chew you up. He has landed over 100 significant strikes in 3 of his UFC fights, and then also 86 against Hardy in his last. But that's kind of the point that I'd like to make. That's the thing, Blaydes won't let anyone fight at a distance. He won't go toe-to-toe in a striker match with Volkov. He'll close the distance and relentlessly shoot for takedowns. Volkov's got decent takedown defense at 75%, and he would have trained all camp, but he has been taken down by Verdum, Nelson and Tim Johnson in the UFC, and I don't think any type of preparation can get you ready for what Blaydes is. And it's even if Volkov can defend a few all throughout the first round, it's not like Blaydes is going to get disheartened and change up the game plan and then try and strike with Volkov. He's just going to keep shooting for takedowns. And once he's on the ground, Blaydes is so heavy, controls the position so well. Volkov only has 3 submissions on his record. He won't offer anything threatening off his back. Once he's on his back, if he can't get up, it spells bad news. And I can't see anything other than Volkov's head just bouncing up and down off the canvas. I'm going to take Blaydes, going to take KO, likely by brutal ground and pound. And I'm playing the second round. It's at 1.83 times at the moment. Playing the second round as 6 of Blaydes' 10 TKOs have come in the second. And I'm also kind of backing Volkov's takedown defense and takedown defense related preparation and freshness in the first to help him survive a bit of wrestling, and then following that just taking the path of least resistance. I will be super intrigued to see how Curtis handles the striking of Volkov. He hasn't really fought anyone with the dimensions and abilities of Volkov, and whether he can still get in and implement his game plan, which I'm pretty confident he will. So wrapping this breakdown up now, wrapping it up now, we're going to the multi per annum. Like I said earlier in the video, we hit last week. We're sitting in the green for a little while, but I think I'll back us to hit another one relatively soon. The first leg, we've got Jim Miller and Roberts to go the distance. I feel like Roberts is going to experience some adversity in this fight, make him wisen up and just realise outpointing a decision is the smartest route with this fight. Miller is durable, but then he gasses late, wears damage poorly, and that goes all in all to Roberts winning a decision. But I haven't played just Roberts to win a decision in case Miller really turns up and just outclasses the youngster in this one. Then gone Bilal Muhammed via decision. Like I said, that's pretty much most of my verdict tip, so I'm rolling with that. I've got Burgos via KO. Again, my verdict tips are all the explanation for that. And then I've gone Blaydes round 1, 2 or 3. Again, self-explanatory. I feel like he's going to get to the ground and he's going to knock Volkov out. And you combine those legs at $44.09 to 1. So I'll be rolling a unit on that and seeing how we go. Again, anybody that stayed this long, I appreciate you checking out the video, checking out the breakdowns. Stay tuned for Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier. I'll be releasing at some point next week. If you want to follow me on Verdict, it's at It's Tadpole to keep up with any main card changes or how I'm scoring the fights on Fight Night. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's _tadpole. There I'll just be releasing kind of when my videos are coming out, a little bit of content related to that, some verdict related content. And yeah, cheers for tuning in.